Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. If you're coming again, I'm so glad to see you. I thought today we could talk about death and dying as it affects us, not just as a hospice nurse, but as nurses in facilities. I have never been a hospital nurse per se, but I have been working closely with ICU nurses, and I see how they are affected by the death of their patients. Has there ever been a time when you felt emotionally affected by a patient's death? And how did you deal with that? And how did you go on with your day? Because as nurses, a person might die at 10 a.m., but you still have to work until 6 p.m. or 3 p.m. or whatever time you get off. But your patient died at 10 a.m. and you really had a good rapport with that patient. You had been their nurse a long time, enough to develop an emotional attachment. And to say that nurses don't do this it's just silly, because we're humans and we have feelings, right? And there have been times when I have been emotionally affected by a death that had nothing to do with someone that I had known for a long time, but just the circumstances themselves hurt my heart. I worked in long-term care, and so I worked in one facility for 11 years, so you can imagine that I developed some close relationships with those residents. I had a CNA once tell me in a long-term care facility that I worked at, a skilled nursing facility. She said, "We're like a dysfunctional family here because we spend so much time together." And I always think of her, and I always think of that, because you are spending a lot of time with your patients, and you are spending a lot of time with the people you work with. And you have the mom, the dad, the sisters, and the cousins of the group, okay? It works that way at work. And you have your work bestie. These patients in skilled nursing facilities, okay, I love geriatrics. I'm just going to be honest, that's my favorite. And I would probably do it forever if COVID had never happened, okay? Because I used to really love working in long-term care. It was my favorite, and working with memory care became something that I really enjoyed, even though it really does get stressful at times. But when you are working long-term care for a long time, you are dealing with people who have longevity, and you are getting to know those people and their habits and their personalities, and you get to learn who they were when they were young. You get to hear about their children, their grandchildren, and their lives and their stories, and you develop a relationship with those people. You just do. You can't come in giving someone care day in and day out and not feel something about them. So I've had a few patients that really just, in long-term care, it just broke my heart when they went. Sometimes they were patients that were just as sweet as they could be, and they didn't have a clue where they were or what planet they were on, but you love them, because they were such sweethearts. And sometimes your behavioral patients were the funniest ones, because they said what everybody else was thinking, right? They said what everybody else wanted to say. And those became my favorite type of patient. I love the ornery people, okay? Because I'm gonna be ornery. I just know when I get to that stage of my life where I hope I'm never in a nursing home, but if I am, I just know I'm gonna be ornery, and I'm a nurse on top of it. Let's be honest, all of us nurses know we are not gonna be good patients. We are those types of nurses. I might bite and I might kick. I don't know, but I think it's a possibility, okay? Because I didn't get to do that in my real life, so maybe when I get to that stage, I might be there. So you know what? I love those patients. When they're not kicking me, I love it. The ornery ones say the stuff that you're thinking, right? And those are the people that get in your heart. Those are the people that are sitting up with you at the nurse's station when you work night shift while you do your charting, so that they don't fall and break something, because they are sitting beside you doing work with you. I have had so many nights where I had a patient sitting at the desk with me talking to me through the night just because they were not gonna sleep. And you can't sedate people. They have a right to be awake all night if they want to. And this is something I didn't think about when I was first starting as a nurse, is that people don't sleep at night, okay? Maybe they work night shift all their life and they're gonna be awake with you, because they're working night shift with you. And I've talked about it before too, that when I first started in nursing, we used to orient people back to reality, but I learned that it wasn't as helpful as it was harmful. But I had a patient who would look for her babies every night, and if you did not help her look for them babies, your night was not going to be good. You had to at least try. And I have had a lot of patients that when they pass, I was sad too. I've had patients in hospice that I didn't anticipate that they were going to die, and I really grieved their death too. Not as a family member, obviously, but you know, when people die in hospice, we've been in their home, seeing that patient, developing a relationship with them, and then their family dies. And that relationship is over. It is, because it's a professional relationship. And we all know that. But the loss of that relationship and the person that you have spent all that time with, it can really hurt your heart too. I have had times when my day was really hard because of a death. And I really had to reel myself back in to give what I needed to give to my other patients. And there have been times that I had to say to my boss, you know, that one really hurt me, and I'm having a hard time coping with it. And I think that it's important as a nurse to be able to say to your coworkers or your boss that you're grieving, that it's okay to say that out loud, that you're grieving the loss of a patient. I have had situations in hospice where my heart has been broken and I didn't know the patient. Because of those family dynamics that happen, sometimes people will die alone. And so sometimes I have sat at the bedside with a patient because I knew that I wouldn't want to die alone, so I didn't want them to die alone. And I think that those ones get in your heart. And I know many nurses feel the same way and do the same things, because we're nurses for a reason, right? We care, we love people. We want to make a difference in the world, we want to help people. And that goes back to not judging people, but meeting them where they're at. When I see a patient that is alone, in my heart, I want to sit with them. I don't want them to be alone during that process. And some people maybe sometimes want to be alone, right? Because you've seen those situations where all the family leaves and then the patient dies after everybody leaves, like they didn't want to die in front of their family, right? But there have been situations where a family member couldn't make it, and I needed to be a stand-in because they didn't want their parent to die alone, right? And those things really take it out of you emotionally sometimes. To give that piece of yourself to someone and to be there for them in that moment is very powerful, and it really affects you as a human being. People say to me all the time, I don't know how you do this job every day because I don't think I could do it. And I want you to know that I do it because it's important. That the death and dying process is important, but I'm not saying that I don't feel anything about it or that I don't go home and feel sad about it. I feel sad when people die. And I think if I stopped feeling sad when people die, then I shouldn't be a nurse anymore. If I didn't have emotions tied to humanity, then I don't think I would be a good nurse anymore. I don't think that I would be in the right profession if I didn't feel things anymore. It's not that we don't feel things as nurses. It's that we recognize that that moment is not about what we are feeling. It is about what you are feeling as a patient and as a family. What your feelings are override whatever feelings I might be feeling about it. And I think too, as nurses, sometimes we empathize with people. We feel the room energy, right? If everybody is sad in the room, obviously sometimes I feel sad and I don't even know why. But it's because we can feel that energy in the room, and that's part of being a good nurse, is reading the room, understanding when everybody is sad, understanding what to say and when to say it. It's really hard sometimes to continue your day. There's times when I had to leave the unit when I was doing GIP admissions because I couldn't hold myself together. I would never want to be a hospice nurse for children. I could never do that. I don't think that I could ever put my emotions aside because I'm a parent. And because if I had to think about being in that position, I would be devastated. And I think those are the hardest ones. And I'm old enough now to have children in their 20s. So when I see someone in their 20s, even though they're not a little kid, to me, they're young enough to be my kid. And hearing a parent grieve is heart-wrenching. It's not always about the death that makes me the saddest. It's the families that get you right here. More than anything for me, it's seeing the family's heartbreak. That is one of the hardest things as a nurse, to maintain my position as that support and the calm in the room and the voice of reason, because I want to cry with them. You know, I want to cry. I am a sympathetic crier. I will cry with you, but you cannot And sometimes as a nurse, your tears are going to come because you have a heart and you're a human and you feel it. But I think when parents lose their children, that heart-rending emotion is more than I can take. And those are the cases that I don't cope with well. And I actually had a job interview where they were a hospice that did care for children and turned it down because of that. And I knew that I was never going to be able to deal with the death of a child. And also when people my age die, it brings to mind my mortality. And I think as human beings, when we see so much death, it's just another reminder of how fleeting life can be and how precious it is, right? Life is so precious. And I think that hospice gives people an opportunity, hopefully, to spend those precious moments doing what makes them feel comfort and love and joy. Because that's what it's about, remembering those precious moments. And I think it's so important for the family to be able to have that ability, if it's possible, to have that closure. But as a nurse, how do you get closure? How do you cope with the loss of your patient? I think I've had some patients that I really just liked a lot, and I probably felt sad for several weeks. And I couldn't just put my finger on why I felt so down. But in looking back, I understand that each death affects me in a certain way. I've seen deaths that are so beautiful. I have come into people that I've only had for 2 or 3 days, and I have had patients that I've had for months and even a year. And I think when you get to those patients who you've had for years, sometimes those deaths really tug at you because you've been seeing them for a year and now all of a sudden you're not seeing them in your day-to-day routine, right? So that, I think when I had some patients die and I felt down for weeks, it was because of the loss of that relationship. But also, I have seen where hospice was really just rewarding and made me understand why I'm doing this job. It allowed a person to come home, be in their own room, looking over their own garden, with the sunshine streaming into their home, with music playing in the background, with their family surrounding them and loving them. And that person never didn't seem loved or comfortable. And I had never seen a death like it. And it was the most beautiful experience to be a part of. And I was so thankful that I could see that aspect of hospice. The idea of coming to your own home, in your own room, in your own territory, looking around at your own views that you love, that made you happy, and opening your eyes and seeing that view before you go. That's what makes my job worth it. That's what makes every death worth it for me, is seeing someone who had the death that they hoped that they would have. Now, not all deaths are peaceful and sunshiny like that, right? Not every death is that way, but I hope that I can give people the kind of deaths that they were hoping to have, surrounded by their family and not in pain. That is why I do this, because I have seen people who don't have a hospice and who don't have those interventions in place and who did not have a peaceful, comfortable death and were not prepared for that time. There have been times in long-term care where someone died suddenly that we were not anticipating their death, right? You get surprises in healthcare. Surprise! We would always say that death comes in threes because that's what it seems to do. And it would always be 2 people that you anticipated going and 1 surprise. It seemed to work that way in long-term care. That's a very morbid thing, but I think we all have our own way of dealing with that aspect of our job. The first 2 or 3 deaths that you experience in healthcare probably affect you the most. I will never forget the post-mortem care that I did the first time. And I will never forget the first time that I did post-mortem care with someone who it was their first time. It's so hard to go from caring for someone that's alive to then giving their final bath, right? You give their final bed bath, essentially. And it is, they're not there. It's not the same as when they were alive. And a lot of people who are doing this for the first time are young. They're teenagers, first starting in their career with the goal of being a nurse. And so you hope as a nurse that you can remember your first death and how it made you feel so that you can comfort someone through their first death. And hopefully that they have that support and love and understanding that it's okay to feel the grief of it as a worker, and it's okay to acknowledge that you felt something about it. I think life is very precious and every death affects me, but I want to continue to do what I do, and I want to continue to be the best nurse I can be and be that support person. What are some times that you've dealt with death and how did it affect you? Did you have a patient that you were really close to and you just felt really sad after they died? Did you talk about it with your coworkers? Did you talk about it to your boss? Did you grieve it? Did you open yourself up to allow that grief to come? I would love to hear about it in the comments. It's a heavy topic today, but if you like my content, I would ask that you like, subscribe, and follow, and we'll talk about it more. I would love to see you soon. Thank you for watching.